This is All Things Agentic, what's actually changing in agentic AI, brought to you by the Agentic Entrepreneur team. The first week of February 2026 was, by any measure, one of the most consequential weeks in the short history of agentic AI. $285 billion wiped from global software stocks. Two of the largest AI companies launched competing enterprise platforms within hours of each other. And a survey of 1,600 business leaders quietly confirms something that most founders already suspected. The vast majority of organizations have no idea how to actually deploy what they're building. If you followed the coverage, the framing was dramatic. SaaS-pocalypse. The death of per-seat licensing. Morgan Stanley warning about software company debt. Bloomberg calling it the biggest AI-driven sell-off markets have ever seen. Here's the thing those headlines miss. Almost all of that drama is about large organizations, enterprise software companies, institutional investors, Fortune 500 IT departments. If you're running a service business from Porto, or a product company from Bangkok, or a consultancy from anywhere with a decent internet connection, the picture looks different. What scared Wall Street this week is, in almost every particular, good news for founders. There's a thread running through all three stories I want to cover today, and I want to name it up front. The same forces that are paralyzing large organizations are creating the widest operational advantage that small, systematic operators have had in a generation. On February 5th, Anthropic and OpenAI both made their most aggressive moves into enterprise AI. On the same day. OpenAI launched Frontier. Anthropic shipped Claude Opus 4.6 and continued rolling out Cowork plugins. And if you read the coverage, you'd think these were two versions of the same thing. They're not. They represent fundamentally different theories about how agents enter the way people work. Start with OpenAI's Frontier. Fidji Simo, OpenAI's CEO of applications, described it as an end-to-end platform for building, deploying, and managing AI agents. Agents get identities, they get onboarding processes, they get permissions and governance layers. OpenAI sends what they call forward-deployed engineers, their people, embedded inside your organization, to get things running. The launch partners are exactly who you'd expect. Uber, State Farm, HP, Intuit, Oracle. The price point isn't public, but industry observers are estimating 6 to 7-figure annual commitments. Note the framing. Frontier treats agents like employees. Simo said explicitly, "We're not going to build everything ourselves." Barrett Zoff, OpenAI's GM for business, put it more directly. "What we're fundamentally doing is transitioning agents into true AI co-workers." The architecture is top-down. It starts with IT, flows through compliance, and eventually reaches the people doing the work. Now look at Anthropic's path. Cowork launched on January 12th. Plugins arrived January 30th. Windows support shipped this week, on February 10th. The architecture is the opposite. It starts on your laptop. Cowork reads your local files, runs on your machine, and uses plugins that are, and this matters, just markdown files. Open source, inspectable, editable. You configure them by describing how your work actually gets done. A Cowork plugin for sales connects to your CRM and follows your sales process. A plugin for legal reviews does contract analysis the way you'd brief a new team member. The architecture is bottom-up. It starts with the individual operator and grows outward. For people running businesses at the scale most of us operate at, this distinction isn't academic. It's the difference between a platform that requires an IT department and a platform that requires $20 a month. The capabilities that spooked Wall Street, the ones that triggered the sell-off, are available to a solo founder for the cost of a decent lunch. Same model underneath, same plugin architecture, same local file access and sub-agent coordination. The gap between what an enterprise deploys and what an independent operator can deploy narrowed dramatically this week. And here's the part that doesn't show up in the coverage. Speed of adoption is a structural advantage of being small. An enterprise deploying Frontier has procurement cycles, security reviews, governance frameworks, change management processes. Reasonable things for organizations of that scale. But a founder who understands their own workflows can have a Cowork plugin configured and running by the end of the day. That's not a marginal difference. That's a different timeline entirely. So what actually triggered the sell-off? Not a model release, not a breakthrough in capabilities, a product update. On January 30th, Anthropic released 11 plugins for Cowork, covering sales, finance, legal, marketing, customer support, and data analysis. Within days, Thomson Reuters had fallen 18%. Relex, the parent company of LexisNexis, dropped 14% in a single day. Salesforce lost 14% over 5 trading sessions. The S&P 500 Software and Services Index, which tracks 140 companies, entered an 8-session losing streak and was down roughly 20% for the year by mid-February. Software price-to-sales ratios compressed from 9 times to 6 times, levels the market hadn't seen since the mid-2010s. Bloomberg called it the biggest stock sell-off driven by fear of AI displacement that markets have ever seen. A new word entered the financial vocabulary: SaaSpocalypse. The investor logic is straightforward, and it's worth understanding even if you're not holding these stocks. For 2 decades, SaaS revenue has been tied to human headcount. More employees means more seats, means more subscriptions. The market looked at Cowork's plugins and asked, what happens to per-seat pricing when an agent handles the work that a human used to need a seat for? If 10 agents do the work of 100 sales reps, you don't need 100 Salesforce licenses. Jason Lemkin at SaaStr had a sharp countertake. Nobody is building a homegrown CRM in Replit to replace their Salesforce instance, he wrote. He's right. Agents aren't replacing the software. But he also named the quieter threat. Agents reduce the headcount that uses the software. That's the real pressure on per-seat models. Now, Gartner weighed in with a measured assessment. Cowork and its plugins are potential disruptors for task-level knowledge work, but are not a replacement for SaaS applications managing critical business operations. The truth almost certainly sits somewhere between the panic and the reassurance. But for people running businesses at our scale, the question isn't about SaaS company valuations. It's simpler than that. How many subscriptions are you paying for because a human needs a login? There's a useful exercise here. Look at your current tool stack, your CRM, your project management platform, your analytics tools, your writing tools, your scheduling tools. For each one, ask, am I paying for the capability, or am I paying for the interface a person needs to access the capability? Those are different questions now. Because the pricing pressure that's terrifying investors is going to flow downstream to you as a buyer. SaaS companies under margin pressure discount. They restructure pricing. They compete harder for smaller accounts. That's already beginning. But the bigger shift is conceptual. There's a phrase circulating in the analyst coverage that I think is worth paying attention to. Service as a software. The inversion of SaaS. Instead of buying a tool and hiring someone to operate it, you buy the outcome directly. The agent is both the tool and the operator. For a founder running a lean operation, that inversion isn't threatening. It's the direction you've been heading anyway. You just didn't have the infrastructure to get there. Now you're starting to. There's a third story from this week that got far less coverage than the sell-off, but might matter more. Celonis, the process mining company, published a survey of 1,649 business leaders. The headline finding? 85% want to become what they call agentic enterprises within 3 years. The finding underneath it? 76% admit their business processes aren't structured for agents to work with. Sit with that gap for a moment. The ambition is near universal. The readiness is nowhere close. The details sharpen the picture. 47% say they lack the internal expertise to deploy agents. 58% of operations leaders report that their departments still work in silos. No end-to-end visibility across the organization. And the 2 biggest obstacles to AI adoption? Lack of internal expertise at 47% and difficulty getting AI to understand the business context at 45%. That second one is the one I want to draw your attention to. Difficulty getting AI to understand the business context. That's not a technology problem. That's a documentation problem, an architecture problem, a nobody's ever written down how this process actually works problem. Large organizations are full of institutional knowledge that lives in people's heads, in tribal customs, in the way Janet in procurement has always handled vendor approvals. None of that is legible to an agent. And making it legible, mapping workflows, documenting decision trees, structuring processes so they can be described to a system that will run them, is genuinely hard when you're dealing with 50 departments, 300 legacy systems, and a decade of accumulated organizational scar tissue. Here's where being small changes the equation entirely. If you're a solo operator or running a team of 3, your processes are yours. You know them because you do them. The client's onboarding workflow isn't buried in a wiki that 6 people maintain and nobody reads. It's the sequence of steps you run every time a new client signs. The content pipeline isn't documented across 4 departments. It's the thing you do on Tuesday mornings. Making those processes agent-ready, describing them clearly enough that a co-work plugin or any structured AI workflow can follow them, is a matter of days, not quarters. You don't need a process mining consultancy. You don't need a digital transformation initiative. You need to articulate what you already know. And that is a genuine structural advantage. The 76% of organizations that can't deploy agents because their workflows aren't legible, that's the competition you're outrunning. Not because your tools are better, not because your AI is smarter, because you can describe your own business clearly enough to configure a system that runs parts of it. There's something almost paradoxical in this. The same operational intimacy that sometimes feels like a limitation. I'm doing everything myself. I know every step because I have to. Turns out to be the foundation that agent deployment requires. Enterprise clients are paying consultants to reverse engineer what you already carry in your head. The question is whether you'll write it down. 3 stories, 1 pattern. The bottom-up adoption path favors operators who are close to their own workflows. The SaaS pricing shift rewards lean operations that can reconfigure faster than institutions can restructure. And the readiness gap, the 76% of organizations that can't make their processes legible to agents, is a moat around the founders who've already done that work, or who are willing to do it now. None of this requires you to have the best tools, the biggest budget, or the most sophisticated infrastructure. It requires operational clarity, knowing how your business actually runs, being able to describe it with enough precision that a system can follow it, and moving quickly when the right capabilities become available. That's always been the advantage of building small and thinking in systems. This week just made it measurable. That's all Things Agentic. The methodology behind this show lives in The Agentic Entrepreneur. The book and the toolkit are at theagenticentrepreneur.pro, and full details can be found in the show notes. Thanks for listening.